Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. With me today in this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan is really talented first term, just elected to a second term, Montgomery County Council member Andrew Friedson. Councilmember Friedson, Andrew, welcome to Kibbitzing with Kagan.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yay. So we've got a hard stop today, and we are both really busy and we have a lot to discuss. But we also share a lot in our background. We were both Hoover Groovers and Churchill Bulldogs, Montgomery County natives. Why don't you talk about growing up in Montgomery County and the changes that you've seen in your life?
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I have such an honor and privilege to be able to represent the only place I've ever called home on the Montgomery County Council, to work in local government where so much of the decisions get made, of the type of communities we have, the type of decisions that we make that determine how we're going to live amongst one another, and to be able to represent so many places that hold such a special place in my life and in my upbringing really is remarkable. I've voted this past time in the polling location at Potomac Community Center, where I used to join my parents to vote in every single election of my childhood. We kicked off my campaign last time at the Potomac Community Center.
I was there. I was there.
And you were there, and
Yep.
that's where I played Little League, and that's where I had my first slow dance at Club Friday. And to be able to go stop by polling places in the district where I'm on the ballot at Wayside and Hoover and Churchill, where I went to school, it's just such a humbling privilege. The other early voting site in District 1 is where my mother went to middle school, Leland Middle
Awesome.
School, which is now Lawton Community Center, where I played basketball as a kid in
Awesome.
recreational basketball league. So it's such an amazing opportunity to be able to do the work that I get to do every day on behalf of the community that has meant so much to me, has done so much for me, has been such an integral part of the community and the village, literally, that has raised me. And certainly our community has changed a lot, demographically and otherwise, but it also really is the same place with such amazing values, with so many structures that I am so familiar with from such a young age.
Yes. Well, let's start, speaking of young age. So can I just say, I think it's amazing that you were student body president at both Churchill and the University of Maryland. I was only vice president at Churchill, so like already you're just way cooler than I ever could be. But anything briefly about how student council, student government prepared you to be a leader, the leader that you are?
Well, absolutely. I appreciate that. It was a really important part of growing up. I actually, when I think about public service, I see it as a calling and not really a career choice. And that calling happened in fifth grade at Wayside. I was advocating for a safer bus route. And that really led me into this idea of student advocacy, which led me to running for student government in sixth grade. I was the first sixth grader to run school-wide at Hoover Middle School, and was the treasurer of Hoover Middle School, smart enough not to run against Kellen Coleman, my brother's friend, who's my friend as well, and ultimately was the student body president at Hoover, and then went on to Churchill. And really, it was less about running for an office and more about being able to advocate for my peers, to see things that I wanted to change and to be in a position to actually do it. That has really carried with me in every role that I've been in my career and really in my life.
That's great. So I want to spend most of our chat talking about your work on the county council, past, present, and future. But give us just briefly, you worked for Comptroller Peter Francho. Give us the brief background, the trajectory that led you to run for office in 2018.
Yeah, sure. I graduated from University of Maryland. As you mentioned, I was the student body president. I had done a lot of work at the state and the federal level, particularly around issues affecting students and college cost affordability, student privacy, election related issues, many issues, frankly, that overlap with some of the work that you have done at the state level. And I ultimately then worked in Virginia and then in Pennsylvania for the Obama campaign in 2008. I graduated really in the heart of that campaign as it was transitioning from the primary to the general. I came back. I worked briefly for a government research startup company. A friend and mentor, former county executive Doug Duncan, was working at a Rockville-based government research startup company had asked me to come and join them, which I did for a short period of time. And then ultimately I got a call from an old friend who had been working with Comptroller Francho and handling his politics, who was gearing up to run for his reelection, and asked me to run the reelection campaign. At the significant age of 23, with all the experience that I had, he in many ways took a leap of faith in me, and really set my course moving forward. I ran that reelection campaign, and then ultimately, really unknowingly at that time, ended up joining the government staff. I became deputy chief of staff and then a senior policy advisor. And for the better part of 8 years, on and off, I worked in various roles in state government, mostly in the comptroller's office, predominantly doing fiscal and economic policy work. I got to have the pension system to secure retirements for our public employees and teachers at the state level, the Board of Public Works, the most powerful administrative body in the state, the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer, 3 members who vote on hundreds of millions of dollars of public contracts and provide the type of oversight.
All new people.
And all new people for the first time. We're going to have three new members of that August body, which is significant. And I served on the 529 college savings program. I actually stepped off that board.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah,
okay.
and stepped off that board and ran that program. But so it really opened me up to do a tremendous amount of things at the state level. And so I had been an advocate in many ways, an administrator at the state level, but an advisor to elected officials. But I missed that advocate role, and that's why I ran for county council, really to be able to be an advocate in the community where I grew up and to be in a position to change things at the local level where they matter the most.
So this is kind of a softball question. 4 years ago, you had a hotly contested primary with some really credible opponents. And this year, your opponents were, the same ones who ran against me. No one. So the difference, what was it like for you campaigning for re-election with no opposition?
Well, I appreciate that. I did exactly what I would have otherwise done, showed up to every event I otherwise would have shown up to. I tried to run the type of campaign I would have, but I did it with a lot less stress. And I will say that is a difference. It makes a big difference. But I really, in many ways, never stop showing up to events. I don't see, being present in the community as an election year activity. I see it as a core function of being an effective public servant. And so, in many ways, I enjoyed the campaign because it was a continuation of the prior 3 years that I've spent in this office that I consider to be a privilege every day I get the opportunity to do it.
Yes. So speaking about effectiveness, affordable housing is something that you had an impact on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've already accomplished on that?
Well, I appreciate that. We have a housing crisis, and we have to be honest about the challenges that we face. One of the changes in the county isn't that it's a really desirable place to live, but it's that a lot fewer people can actually afford to live here. That is dramatically different than what it was in the 1980s and the early 1990s. When I was growing up, we basically stopped building housing at that point. And basically from the 90s until essentially 2010, we built almost no housing relative to the population growth that we were experiencing. It's actually staggering if you look at the data. And
how much, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. How much do you attribute that to the sentiments of the elected officials? How much of it to the NIMBY, not in my backyard civic activist types? How much to the economy? What's the explanation there?
It's yes and for all of that. So some of it is the politics of anti-growth, which has dominated county politics for decades. Some of it is economic conditions on the ground. Some of it is just land use patterns. We had a lot of open space to build on farmland that wasn't in the agricultural reserve. And we just dedicated 1/3 of the county's land mass to agriculture. We had quite a bit left for many, many years. I'll give an example. Next to Har Shalom, where you and I grew up and continue to belong as our synagogue, right next to where I live, Claggett Farm was a horse farm when I was growing up, going to Hebrew school there. By the time I was bar mitzvahed, which wasn't true when my siblings were bar mitzvahed. Two of my siblings were bar mitzvahed where Claggett Farm had horses. And my brother and I were bar mitzvahed when Claggett Farm were 200 houses, 225 houses. And that is one microcosm example of the changes. And so you combine all of this together where we no longer could grow out and there was resistance to grow up, which is essentially what happened in the county. And you end up with a massive housing supply crisis, which is not unique to our suburban jurisdiction, like suburban jurisdictions all over the country. And so over the last 4 years, we have, I think, done more in housing than we've ever done. We have to do a lot more. We created a $100 million fund with the Housing Opportunities Commission, which is now being modeled in jurisdictions all over the country. It's bonded and it's extremely affordable in the scheme of public taxpayer dollars, one of the best deals we have done on housing. We lifted the Housing Initiative Fund, which is the primary vehicle to fund affordable housing, to $100 million in addition to that will fund our ongoing efforts and continue that work. We did something called a pilot, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, which is essentially a tax abatement, a tax deferral to provide more certainty to nonprofit housing providers so they could compete in the private market with for-profit and market rate providers to try to help them to build more affordable housing. We have encouraged and incentivized housing at Metro, an area that is a parking lot that collects zero taxes.
It's smart growth right at mass transit.
It is the most strategic and the smartest place that we can have housing. And we don't just want housing, we want high-rise housing because we want to increase the environmental sustainability. We want to increase equity. We want to increase economic opportunity. And we want it to be right there in the most important places. We can turn a parking lot into a vibrant place. And that is a powerful signal. Instead of a hole in the most important part of our community, we can have a hub for our community. And so, we worked on that. There's a number of other examples of things that we have done, but we have really changed the narrative and the conversation. And I'm proud to continue that work. I have a bill that we are about to put in as we look forward to really drive the co-location of housing on public county sites. We have failed time and time again to leverage new recreation centers, new libraries, new police stations, new fire stations to co-locate with housing because we viewed it as not a suburban thing. That's more of an urban thing. Well, guess what? Montgomery County is a rapidly urbanizing county. Our public lands have to be part of this equation. And so we're really pushing the needle on that. And we're looking to work more and more with faith-based and nonprofit partners to leverage their land and their parking lots so that we can really create vibrant places and spaces where we used to park vehicles only for a few hours a week, which is a really significant waste of space.
Right. Thanks. So speaking of housing, I worked, as you know, on abortion rights at the national level, gun control, and yet it was on affordable housing that I had the ugliest experiences with folks. It's a tough issue. So thank you for your leadership. I want to shift. You talked about the place where you and I are lucky enough to be able to go to pray and to gather as a Jewish community, and that's Har Shalom. The Jewish community, once again, has been hit with just extraordinary hate. And I want to just set up what you have done in this area. And I really just want to be way on the record again, right here on your leadership. The Jewish community represents 10% of Montgomery County population, and yet 85% of the reported hate crimes and hate and violence. And you talk more about that. But once again, and today we're dressed up because we're going to a gala against hate, the Anti-Defamation League. But you sponsored a resolution, non-binding resolution, and to condemn hate and violence and anti-Semitic acts. And thanks to your leadership, ultimately that passed unanimously, but it was not a pretty process. So talk us through both the problem and then the solution as you have achieved it so far.
Yeah, well, definitely not a solution, but an important part of the journey. And today was an unfortunate reminder we just experienced this morning several incidents along the Bethesda Trolley Trail with graffiti at a bus stop on Tuckerman Lane that references white power and has a swastika, and literally references to Jews on gallows being hanged, and anti-Semitic and white nationalist and neo-Nazi symbolism. And this is an area where families walk and gather, people use on a regular basis. And in fact, it's the second incidence in the span of only a couple of months in this exact location where this anti-Semitic, hate-filled, really violently, symbols, violent symbols have been utilized, and it's just the latest in a string of incredibly graphic and horrific anti-Semitic incidents that have happened throughout the county, in Kemp Mill at bus stops, in Chevy Chase, as I mentioned, in Bethesda multiple times, in Potomac. I mean, it is happening everywhere throughout our county, and it's happening throughout the country. And the resolution was important as a way to address and combat anti-Semitism, and to really be part of what is a desperately needed conversation of not just the times where we see it, where the community comes together and we make the statements like we did today in a powerful way, which I'm proud of and I appreciate, but also in identifying what anti-Semitism is, when it is being normalized, when it is being desensitized, because it is in those moments, the casual anti-Semitism that is said with laughter as a response, that is done in a way that doesn't get a reaction, that ultimately can be part of a far more ugly and far more damaging version if we allow it to snowball and don't call it out for what it is. And so we desperately need that education. We absolutely need to have this conversation of the nuances of what these dog whistles are when people talk about the role of Jews in Hollywood and in the media and in politics, and references to Jews and money, and banking and the financial sector. These are not random one-off matters of social commentary. These are the modern manifestations of age-old anti-Semitic tropes, Jew hatred.
And let's be clear, criticism of Israel, Israeli policy, or Israeli leaders is not anti-Semitism. Jews criticize Israeli leaders and Israeli policies, so that's not it. That is an acceptable disagreement as long as it's done respectfully. But it's other manifestations, as you said, of tropes and of hate.
Absolutely. And so we're seeing it. It's rising. It is deeply alarming. I hear from several people on a daily basis of the fear of walking to synagogue, walking back from synagogue. I've heard from parents just today about whether or not they should pull their kids out of Jewish day school because of their concern about whether or not the school will be a target of violence. This is just not acceptable. The ugliness, the darkness of the moment that we're in is just deeply, deeply disturbing. And we need to do what we can to shine a light on it, to call it out, and to come together to combat it, because it is deeply, deeply embedded in our society, and it is showing itself in a very, very alarming way.
Can you just say briefly how the police, Chief Jones and the county and municipal police forces, and how they've been responsive?
Well, our police department is incredible in its responses to bias incidents. And I say bias incidents loosely because even when it doesn't rise to the level of a hate crime, for instance, graffiti that has a swastika on it is investigated as a hate crime because graffiti is vandalism, and vandalism is a crime. But the leaflets in Chevy Chase, for instance, a leaflet is not a crime, necessarily. And even if you have white nationalists, anti-Semitic, anti-Black racist, or other aspects, that those are bias incidents. They are threatening to the community. They have real impacts on people. They have victims in many ways. but they're not necessarily a hate crime. But either way, in both instances, our police department, better than just about any other police department in the country, really addresses those bias incidents with seriousness. They get reported. We work together with partners like ADL and the FBI and others, the Anti-Defamation League, which tracks this at the national level. And we really do work closely with our police department, like we did today. We had Jewish Community Relations Council, the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, working very closely with the police department, with the Department of Transportation, with our executive branch, with my office, with our regional service center, all working collaboratively to address this issue, to get it cleaned up, to get it investigated, to work with community members who were harmed. And we continue to do that. So, the bad news is Montgomery County is not immune to these horrible things that are happening in communities across the country and throughout the world. Yes. The good news is our government is responding to it in a way that not all governments do. Our police department responds to it in a way that not all police departments do. And so I think that at least should give a sense of appreciation for all of us as Jews and as community members, that the police department and the county are taking this very, very seriously.
So I still have a lot of questions and we don't have a lot of time. You are on the boards of Strathmore Hall and Glen Echo and the Montgomery County, the Economic Development Committee. I'd like to focus primarily on economic development. What's the trick? What's the secret sauce to bringing more jobs, more economic development, more opportunity to Montgomery County?
Well, it's a critical question. We have everything that we need in Montgomery County to be successful. So I think we need to be very clear about that. And I think we too often talk about the things we aren't doing and don't often talk enough about the things that we are doing and the things that we do have. I would put up our strategic assets in Montgomery County up against any other jurisdiction anywhere in the world. And largely we will win. One of the challenges that we have is that we haven't always been as strong as the sum of our parts. And we need to be more intentional. We need to be more strategic. We need to eliminate some of these silos. We need to understand, really for the first time, that the regional competition, the global competition for jobs, for investment, for families to want to move here, locate here, invest here, is real. And for a long time, Montgomery County was such a great place that we had to do very little. And we would get a level of investment and a level of support, and we wouldn't really have to worry much about it. Well, now everybody else has stepped up their game, and we have to step up our game. And so we've been working on that. In my first year, I introduced legislation to require economic impact statements on all bills, so that we're not just focused on the impact on the county's budget, but on the budgets of residents and businesses. Their budget makes up our budget. I think that's really important. Number two, we've added a new comprehensive and collaborative economic development strategic plan for the county. For a while, we had about 7 or 8 economic development plans in the county. And you and I both know if you have 7 or 8 strategies, you don't have a strategy. If you prioritize everything, you've prioritized exactly nothing. Right. So we now have this plan that is derived not from the government, but from the Economic Development Corporation with the private sector, then gets approved by the county council and the county executive, so that we can all be on the same page, all be on the same team, all move in one strategic direction together, and then importantly have metrics and have accountability measures and can be able to hold ourselves to actually following through with the type of jobs and private sector investment that we need. We can't just rely on the federal government. We need a private sector economy to be able to support our social goals.
In your district, every time I drive up 355 Rockville Pike, I see the mess that used to be White Flint. Briefly, how's it going? What are your hopes? But really fast.
Well, White Flint, which is now North Bethesda, the White Flint site is part of a broader sector plan, and there's a lot actually happening along that corridor in the North Bethesda Pike District area. The area surrounding the metro, you see not just Pike and Rose, but a number of other development projects that are happening. Yes. So the exciting news is things are happening. They haven't happened nearly as fast as we would want them. And the hope is it will help to spur the old mall site, which is not the only parcel, but it's one of the largest and most high profile parcels. I will say we just had exciting news. There's now an agreement between the University of Maryland, College Park, the University of Maryland, Baltimore, the two preeminent computing and computer science program in the country, and life science research programs in the country with North Bethesda and Montgomery County government. And we are going to have not only a world-class research triangle for the first time that connects these historically siloed areas, but also importantly, I think is going to be the preeminent health computing area in the world. People are going to come from all over the world to get research from this area that's going to be based in Montgomery County, based in North Bethesda. And I think it's going to be the start of something really special. And it really leverages Montgomery County's leadership across the world in life sciences and biohealth. We are a leader. We are going to be the leader in biohealth sciences in the world.
A chunk of that is in my district in Gaithersburg and Rockville. I just got to give a shout out to my folks.
Absolutely.
You referenced leadership. Our county executive, Mark Elrich, was elected 4 years ago by a margin of 77 votes and was just reelected by a margin of 34 votes. There are a lot of folks who don't find him that effective or strategic. How does the council work with a county executive like this?
Well, there's certainly an opportunity for a reset with the relationship between the county executive and the county council. I think there is an imperative to do that. Most residents do not differentiate between the county executive and the county council. I'm humble enough to understand that most people don't know my name and don't know the job that I hold, nor do they really even understand that there is a job that I hold. And I think we need to be honest about that and serious about that and be able to work together collaboratively to move the ball forward. Our residents deserve that. They expect that. And I think we owe it to them to make that happen. And we have 6 new council members joining what is now going to be an 11-person council. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to fulfill what our residents expect us to do.
Yes. I was going to ask about the shift from 9 to 11. And also, you are the youngest council member ever elected. The fact that it's going to be majority female and you bring a generational perspective. Why don't you tell us about that and the impact that those are going to have?
Yeah, I appreciate it. 4 more years, and I'm still the youngest council member ever. First of all, I'm really excited. We have 6 new women that are joining the council, and it's not just the fact that it was embarrassing that we had 1 of 9 women on the council. I mean, which Nancy Navarro punches well above her weight. There's no doubt about that. And she and I worked very closely together. And not only was the longest tenured council member and carried with her a level of respect and admiration because of her tenure here, but also because of her effectiveness and the causes that she championed, in a very constructive and productive way. But only having 1 woman, I mean, it was embarrassing for a place like Montgomery County to have that dynamic. Well, that is changing. It is changing overwhelmingly. We're going to have a new majority on the council. And I think what I would say is most important about it is that we have 6 new women, all who bring very different backgrounds. They come from different generations in many ways. They come from different political, philosophies in terms of where they fall along the spectrum and how they approach the work. They come with very different professional experiences and professional issues that they care about, approaches to those issues. So I think they're going to play a significant role in really driving the conversation at the county council and in the public discourse. And I think it's going to be really exciting time for us as council members and as a county government.
Great. And the youngest, what do you bring that others don't?
Well, it's a different perspective. I think obviously my life experience is different from others. I don't think it's better or worse. It's just different, but different voices and different perspectives make for a better result. And I think, you don't want a soup that only has 1 ingredient in it. And I think we have more ingredients in the soup. And that means we're going to have better tasting policy and conversation in the end.
Perfect. Well, it is time, Councilmember Andrew Friedson, for our Fast 5. 5 quick questions with very quick answers. Question number 1. What is your favorite inspirational quote?
It always seems impossible until it's done.
Love that. Question 2, what is your favorite place to hang out outside in Maryland, but outside of Montgomery County?
In Maryland, outside of Montgomery County,
Yep.
the Inner Harbor in Baltimore.
Okay. Question 3, in diverse Montgomery County, we have a lot of options. What is your favorite kind of ethnic food?
Oh, it's hard to pick, but probably Indian.
Okay. Uh, Question 4, what is your favorite genre of music?
I'd say classic rock.
Okay, good one. And question 5, the one I ask everyone. Councilmember Andrew Friedson, what is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent that you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Oh gosh, I don't think I have any. My talent is that I have done pretty well with very little talent. That's my talent.
Okay, that's insanely modest and inaccurate, but Andrew, Councilmember Friedson, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for taking time to chat today, and I look forward to seeing you tonight and often in the future as we work together on many important issues facing Montgomery County and the region.
Likewise, it's been my pleasure, and really look forward to it. And we'll kibitz again soon, I hope.
Perfect. Stay well. See you
Take
soon.
care. Bye.